over. 3, 2, 1. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever it is you're joining us. Happy Monday. My name is Meg, and I am part of the Power to Fly virtual hosting team. I am super excited to get started with today's office hour session and introduce you to the wonderful women behind Project Matriarchs. As we get going here, I do just have a couple quick notes for all of you. First off, for basic housekeeping, we really appreciate and encourage participation from our audience and our attendees. So to that end, you are more than welcome to come off mute and ask questions, add comments. You can also participate by putting your questions or comments into the Zoom chat. If you do come off mute or for whatever reason, you will show up on the Zoom on the recording of this session, which we are live streaming to our YouTube page, and we'll be storing the recording on our YouTube page as well as our website. So if you want to participate but don't want to be seen, not a problem. Just put any questions or comments into the Zoom chat. If you want to be in deep cover and don't want anyone to know you're here, not a problem. You can still ask questions or comment. Just send it to me directly. So instead of sending it to everyone in that Zoom chat, you'll use the little drop-down menu and select my name from the list. If you do come off mute, make sure you are only coming off mute for when you're actively asking a question. That's going to keep the audio clarity clear for today's call. We are going to, like I said, if you try not to talk over our lovely guest speakers or any of our attendees. As well, if I'm talking too much, please feel free to interrupt because I get paid to fill the silence. So I want to make sure that y'all have as much time as possible to talk with these amazing women. Everybody that registers is going to get an email link in 1 to 2 days to where you can rewatch this recording. Whether you came today, stayed for 5 minutes, stayed for the full 30, or didn't make it for whatever reason, you'll still get an email to rewatch the recording. And if you know Lola or Pilar says something amazing and you just have to tell somebody about it today, not a problem. You can head over to our YouTube channel and you can catch the recording of this pretty much as soon as we're done recording today. Let's see. Follow us on all of our various social channels where we are at Power to Fly on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and I think that's it. Yeah, 5. And before we get going here, I just want to take a minute to introduce you to our 2 amazing speakers. Let me present my screen here. Share screen. There you go. So I'd love to introduce you to our 2 amazing speakers. Pilar McDonald and Lola McAllister. They are the founders of Project Matriarchs, and I'm super excited for you to get to know them and ask them questions today. So Lola and Pilar, I know you all have a presentation you'd like to start with. Do you want to start with that now?
Yeah, that'd be awesome if I can share my screen.
Okay.
Kind of start.
Yeah, there you go. You should be able to start from there.
Wonderful. Can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Yes, so I'm Pilar. Lola is my co-founder in all of this, and we're very excited to have you all here and appreciative for your time on this Monday afternoon. To just kind of jump in, Yes, so I'm Pilar, that's Lola, and we have pretty similar backgrounds. We actually went to middle school together. We're from the Bay Area in California, and so have been basically best friends since 3rd or 4th grade, and very lucky to be in this fight together. We both finished our first year of college, took this year off, and then are planning on going back to college in the fall. And so just wanted to use our unique positionality as college students and possible working mothers. We both identify with she, her, hers pronouns. And so kind of being in this fight within our identities, really wanting to be able to support working moms specifically, as well as just confront this gender inequity that is being raised during the pandemic.
So a tiny bit of background on Project Matriarchs. Pilar and I thought of this and got moving on this this past summer in July. And so Project Matriarchs is a growing community of college students committed to keeping caregivers, particularly mothers, in the workforce during the pandemic. And we'll get a bit into more of the service that we provide and the particulars of how we execute our mission a little bit later.
Yep. So we can kind of jump back to this, but it would be great to just hear, and we can actually just type these in the chat and then revisit any personal anecdotes as we continue along in our conversation. But something we very much appreciate is kind of the question of who are you caring for? And so our presentation in Project Matriarch specifically focuses a lot on kind of parents caregiving for their children. But we also believe that caregiving goes far beyond that. So we were actually just talking with Meg before all of you stepped in here, and she was kind of talking about caregiving for an animal or kind of different friends within that. And so wanting to just make sure that we acknowledge caregiving as something we do for ourselves, spouse, friends, partners, animals, friends, and then of course, this idea of children as well. So approaching this within our companies and employers as a caregiving issue altogether. So a little bit more, very brief presentation, because of course we want to get to the meat of this conversation and discuss and hear from all of you. But we will quickly kind of go over what we see as the problem that Project Matriarchs is trying to address, what we do at Project Matriarchs, and then the conversation around creating lasting change and doing it together. So to quickly go through some of the immediate challenges we've identified, especially in our conversations with the stakeholders of this fight, mainly working mothers as well as working caregivers. I'm sure a lot of you kind of may have felt this firsthand or seen the different research presented, but mothers, especially those in heterosexual relationships, are taking on a large disproportionate burden of childcare as well as homeschooling responsibilities during the pandemic. And with that, women, particularly mothers, are leaving the workforce at an unprecedented rate and much higher than their male identifying colleagues, as well as women identifying colleagues who aren't actually caregiving for children. And unlike a lot of the working mothers who dropped out of the workforce previously, many of them are talking about how that is due to being able to not balance childcare as well as work during the pandemic. And then lastly, as an immediate challenge, working caregivers are really reporting that they're feeling very isolated and desperate, really affecting their emotional and mental health, which can, of course, influence kind of how they are able to be committed to their work as well as just kind of performance. And then, of course, wanting to be able to support these caregivers to build a society in which we are supportive of those who are caring for each other. I don't know if any of you saw, but the New York Times just published a large kind of portfolio of different articles focusing on just reporting of working mothers and kind of some of their stories. And one of the ones they posted was actually some footage of a hotline that they created where working mothers could call in and what they called the primal scream. And so their supports would really recommend any of you check it out if you haven't already, but just kind of the emotion behind that. And then lastly, just some of the long-term consequences. The pandemic and kind of all that has led up to this really threatens to erode progress towards gender equity, both at home and in the workplace. And so Lola and I are really in this because the idea that we as a society can revert to the norm that a mom's place is within the home really terrifies us. And we want to make sure that we are fighting for current working mothers as well as future working mothers.
Okay, so here are some quotes from interviews we did when we were kind of in our need finding stage early on this past summer, talking to as many working mothers as we could. And we feel like these quotes kind of do a good job of framing the issues we are talking about. So the first one touches on the kind of emotional and mental burden of both caregiving and staying committed to work at the same time. This mom said, I avoid this question or start sobbing, this question being, how are you handling both work and caregiving at the moment? The second quote, it feels like every family for themselves and it's really falling on the moms. That's just how it is. So the sense that that's just how it is something we want to challenge. The fact that the status quo is that these responsibilities fall on mothers, that's something that needs to change, and the pandemic has just underscored that. And this idea that it's every family for themselves is incredibly isolating, and is a reflection of the fact that kind of structural support systems are completely insufficient right now. And thirdly, as a working mom, if I don't don't step out? Am I not prioritizing my kids? Am I choosing my career over my kids? Why don't our husbands feel this way? So this kind of internal conflict and burden about what to prioritize right now, given the lack of support, is just so crazy. And this point that our male counterparts aren't feeling the same way is really powerful. And it's something Pilar and I feel really strongly about, is how do we bring men into these conversations, particularly young men, so that we can influence the way that like the gender dynamics in particularly heterosexual relationships tend to go in the future. So something we believe is that companies cannot afford to lose female talent, and therefore they should invest in retaining it. There's a lot of research that shows that when women are well represented at the top, companies are far more likely to outperform their peers. So that's just a different angle on this same issue. So a tiny bit about our solution, which comes in the form of the service we currently provide. We match college students with families to provide virtual academic support and mentorship to their children. And we offer this service on a sliding scale payment model. So if a family is unable to pay anything at all at this moment, that is completely fine. And we ask that families contribute only what they can, what feels sustainable and comfortable at the moment. Yeah. So now we're going to jump into a bit of a discussion. We really want to hear from you all, so we appreciate your participation. And we'll kind of use some of the questions you guys asked us beforehand to frame this discussion.
Yeah, so one of the first questions we wanted to just jump in with is what policies or ideas can we present to our employers that will help us find this balance between the demands of our jobs and the needs of our children? And so Lola nor I identify as parents or have any children of our own. And so, of course, this is a conversation or a question that we want to bounce around and have a discussion around. But we have talked to a lot of employers and a lot of working parents at this point. And so some things that we have found from this, kind of the top one we found is just the involvement of those impacted, meaning working caregivers, whether that be parents or people caregiving in some other way, in brainstorming and decision making. So this can look like kind of how we work to employ specific policies around COVID and kind of what that looks like in terms of how to manage different screens on Zoom, whether it's your work screen in a work meeting and your child's class in another, or just all the new challenges that are being presented right now. And so these decisions often come in a top-down kind of often uninformed approach. And so we know that it is proven to be very impactful to have the conversation be from employees at all levels, because of course, these challenges are impacting people in different ways. With that, leaders demonstrating honesty and transparency and creating an environment of openness. So this can look like kind of relating specifically to the pandemic, whether that be my child has had the longest day on Zoom ever. Zoom classes are really getting to them. And so he needs to be taken outside right now on a walk, and we need to go to the park together to share that time together. And I'm doing this work on Zoom and it's almost done, or my part is done. So I actually can continue my work after this meeting. And so I need to step out right now. Or of course, all the other needs of kind of, of course, my children are screaming and yelling and my dog's barking in the back of my Zoom meeting, not because I want to do that, but also there is no necessity for me to apologize. Of course, this is not the normal, and it's not that we want to normalize all that is going on in the chaos inside the home. But at the same time, working mothers and working parents should not be penalized or judged for that at all. So just employees, again, from all levels at a company, being able to be honest and open about this. Subsidizing childcare and tutoring is also a thing that has come up a ton for us. We founded Project Matriarchs with the intention of offering a free or pay what you can model to be able to do this for families. But I think that a lot of families and working parents have actually said that if our employer saw this as an issue and just allocated funding towards it, even if I am able to pay the $15 wage that we pay our college students, for example, it would actually just kind of, as something from the employer, mean a lot to me. So making sure that those are services included as, next year's funding and budgeting goes out. And then also adding flexibilities into schedules. So this is something that a lot of employers have actually focused on during the pandemic, but not always including parents or caregivers in that conversation. So we've heard from a lot of parents, the hours of 7:30 to 9 are incredibly chaotic every morning because I have to feed 4 different kids different breakfasts and get everyone on their Zoom school and get some people dressed and others out the door and all that is going on. And so maybe that's not the best time for an important meeting. Or there are many parents who are feeling that, and yet they have to kind of congregate on a Zoom meeting or something. And so really bringing people into the conversation to add flexibility and understanding on what works best for everyone. And then lastly, just adjusting performance expectations. So this can not necessarily be a lower standard of work or a caliber that is different, but just acknowledging that performance and work can come in different forms. And so wanting to make sure that that is accessible and understandable for parents. So I know that was a lot of information that we kind of just threw at you, but we wanted to ask if any of you kind of have experiences or other things that have worked specifically for you. And then also just how we can best support you. Lola and I feel very lucky to kind of have the time and energy and resources on our hand as we aren't currently working parents or working caregivers. So wanted to start the conversation between everyone on kind of what we can do as individuals and working with our employers in that way. So if anyone has any questions or personal anecdotes, we would love to hear them and work together on that.
So we do have one issue being raised in the chat here. This person, hold on, let me scroll back up. So this person is saying, I'm lost on what to do when my employer says they understand, but then bombard me with tasks and work outside of the 9 to 5 hours because I had to take a longer break during the day to accommodate a child, especially when overtime has to be approved, but you're working on tasks late at night or outside regular hours. So I personally, I feel this hard because when I moved from a 9 to 5 job to from an in-person job to working remotely from, for Power to Fly, that was 2.5 years ago. It was, the line between work and home was huge for me. And that was even without, having the demands of pets or having my entire family home all day. And so I feel like there's probably a lot of people that can relate to this issue because if you're having, like you said, if you want that flexible schedule, then how do you make sure that you're drawing that line and not being, kind of bombarded with a lot more work than you would normally be expected to handle at a 9 to 5 hours, and kind of eating into, even if it's not over what you're normally working, expectations and productivity wise, if it's still stretching longer and longer and longer, you're kind of on the losing end of that, right? And if you has anybody, I mean, obviously we want to ask the rest of the group as well, but Lola and Pilar, have you heard of anybody, ways that people work around this or anything? Oh, Gemma's got her hand raised. So Gemma, if you want to come off mute, you're more than welcome to.
Hi. So 2 weeks ago, January 25th, I'm in HR at a public accounting firm, and my boss literally told me, she's in HR. She told me to breastfeed and work at the same time, which is, illegal.
Yeah.
So I've talked to the right people. The top of HR, the chief executive, the co-chief executive, and I've talked to people on Power to Fly and Alexandria White, Leslie Ford, who's got Mom's Hard Give Needs. I LinkedIn messaged them, and they both answered me, and I'm in a few mom groups, all virtual, and mothers that are nursing are just mouth wide open, can't believe it. And I'm I was in shock for a week.
Well, how could you not be? It's it's so blatantly not okay. And yet this is, these are the kinds of things that you get asked.
Yeah. And I met her when I returned to work. She started the Monday after I stopped working last July. So, it's been 3 months that we've worked together and I've been under her. But for someone who doesn't want children, doesn't have children, I'm trying to paint the picture of what I'm dealing with here. I have my 6-month-old daughter. My husband and I are working from home. We live with my parents, and I work in my dining room, just like when I was pregnant. I mean, I went remote second week of last March, and then my company went remote when shelter in place happened. But it's like I've gone through a pregnancy during this pandemic. I've delivered in a hospital with the mask on and pushed her out. I've been postpartum in a pandemic. We're still dealing with the pandemic. I've now returned to work. A month ago, I went down to 4 days a week because I planned that, but it's like I can't do 40 hours with my mental health. Like to squeeze that in during, normal business hours. Like we have core hours that are 10:30 to 3:30, and on my document to go down to 4 days a week, 32 hours, they want me to like be available during those core hours, which the month of January, because my daughter started teething, I would work before sunrise and after sunset because that's just my reality. And the January 1st, January 2nd, I didn't sleep for 40 hours. I was so stressed about the days that were coming. January 4th, I had to onboard 8 new hires virtually. Hadn't done that ever. Hadn't onboarded in 10 months. And the next day was my first Tuesday off. It's like, can we afford this? Can we afford a big pay cut? I live next to San Francisco. We're trying to move out. Childcare is expensive, but we survive every day. And financial services industry certainly has a lot of progress to make to support working parents, especially working moms. But it definitely lit a fire in me that I attended Diversity Reboot last week. The networking hours were awesome. I've already talked to 2 people on Zoom yesterday from that. And I'm empowered to not let anyone else go through this. I don't want her to lose her job. I want her to maybe learn some emotional intelligence, and I want a different supervisor assigned to me because she asked me, well, what would you do if you were in the office? And I'm like, well, I'd have to pump and bring that home.
Well, but it's like, what would you do if you were in the office? Well, she wouldn't exactly ask you to sit at your desk and keep typing while you pumped. Like, come on.
I could go to the office. At least I'd have quiet there. But I'm not safe outside my building. I'm safe in the building, but not outside the building. I'm not going to take the train to work because the train was already sketchy before COVID, and now with less riders, there's more crime.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
Sorry, Meg, I had to laugh because my daughter's 12, when I had her and I went back to work, I had an office. Luckily, I had a private office. I taped paper up on the window of the office, and I would pump while I was in my office working on conference calls. What's that noise? Oh, that's just the fan. I mean, the things that we do are unfortunate. I will say that, in 10 years, I feel things have changed dramatically. When that, back at that point, I don't think that there were, there may have been lactation rooms required, but we hadn't gotten to that point yet. So things definitely have changed in the past 10 years.
Well, and just because it's the law doesn't necessarily mean every place is going to be compliant.
No, they don't.
I mean, how long have the ADA laws been in place? And you still, I mean, I'm in Ohio and I still see buildings that are not, disability accessible. And that's a pretty simple thing. Like wheelchair ramps are a pretty simple thing. You see them but just about everywhere, but it's still, people aren't compliant because they haven't had to be. Nobody's pushed them. Nobody's made a big fuss over it. And so it breaks my heart that, that Gemma's having to go through this because you're right. These are things that have, lactation rooms are a thing. They've been established. The idea that you should not be asked to continue typing while you're pumping is just, it's a thing. And it makes it, as somebody with a legal background too, it makes me so mad, so incredibly mad that I didn't finish on with my legal studies so that I could maybe do something about this.
And I did tell my boss, well, I've had to breastfeed and work at the same time. It's not ideal. I don't want to transfer milk, stress in my milk, but I make do.
Yeah. All right, so Lola and Pilar, I know we only have about 6 minutes left today. These chats always go way too quickly, but let's keep going and see if what else we can get through that you all wanted to talk about with our group here today, as well as kind of some information for people that are interested in your programs and how to reach out to you and connect later. Oh, and I also shared a couple links in the chat where if you want to talk, if you want to check out past panels and past events that we've had on this subject, both from HR managers who can tell you kind of what you can ask for and how to approach your employers about this, please check out that link that I put into the Zoom channel or Zoom chat. It's going to be super helpful to have all of our past talks about this. All right, so Eileen, I see your hand raised. Let's get to Lola and Pilar, and then we will make sure we call on you before time runs out today. Lola and Pilar, take it away.
Yeah, so the next question we got from you all that we'd like to dive into with you collaboratively. So I already tried to have this conversation in my workplace and I didn't have the outcome I was expecting. Do you have any tips that I can apply on my own? So we kind of compiled a list of the things that you can do independently to try to advocate for change in subtle, some more kind of like outright courageous ways on an everyday basis. So bringing up caregiving in conversations with both colleagues and supervisors can be kind of daunting, especially if you're in a workplace where there's a lot of stigma around these topics. But we've heard from a lot of women that bringing these things up, just starting to mention them, slowly erodes that stigma. And then advocating for an employee resource group for caregivers within your company. Those can be really powerful spaces that can advocate for larger changes within your company. And then potentially advocating for an internal review of how the pandemic has impacted caregivers, both personally and professionally, particularly within your company. And then using those results to demonstrate need and propose some solutions. And then also just utilizing resources that exist to kind of rate your employers, which kind of serves to increase transparency and communicate with other employees with a little bit more anonymity. For example, there's an amazing company called In Her Sight that provides a platform for this, similar to Glassdoor, but kind of more particular to women's needs. So we would love to hear from you all if you've tried out any of these strategies or if you have any other suggestions that might help the other women on this call. We would love to hear from you.
Okay, we'll call on Eileen here, but before we do, I just want to throw in, again, my 2 cents, because I sit in on like literally 3 to 5 of these chats a week. I put another link in the channel here, and it's from a bunch of our chats that are on negotiations. These are hugely helpful and can apply in a variety of situations. Anything by Donna Hughes, she's amazing and one of my favorite negotiation speakers. But a lot of what she talks about is using a relationship that you have with your employer to make things mutually beneficial and ways to communicate so that you are more likely to get what you want out of the situation. So please, please, please check those out. Eileen, if you would like to come off mute and tell us what you have to say.
Sure. So I'm Aileen. I work for a small team, and I'm actually the first person in my company to be a working mom ever. So company has been around for 10 years, but majority male workers or women who aren't choosing to have childcare or children. Can you tell I was up 3 or 4 times a night last night with my newborn? So something that I really hope companies will think about is post-pandemic life. I talk to a lot of companies who, everyone is talking about this shift to, a hybrid work model. I don't think people, for the most part, want to go back into the office 5 days a week across the board. But, from a career advancement and visibility perspective, that could really be challenging for working parents who want to take advantage of that benefit, who say aren't going to want to go back into the office as much as their coworkers or colleagues who, don't have to get kids to daycare, aren't rushing against the clock to get home so that you can spend more time with your kids. So, how can you normalize working from home in post-pandemic life when we're on, we're probably going to be on Zooms with people who are in the office and out of the office. How can you support working parents so that it doesn't seem like they're, not working as much or not putting as much effort in just because they are not physically in a space when it is safe to do so?
Yeah, we got a comment from Namsa in the chat saying that she's worried about this too, because communities were a lot more understanding in March 2020 than they are now. And I think you're kind of right. It's that initial shock factor has worn off really. And I feel like part of it's because, people get used to things relatively quickly. And because we are, a year and some change into this, you're right. You do see less understanding and less compromise from workers and from their employees, or from employers, I should say.
Yeah, I think the flexibility aspect of it is going to be key. as you mentioned, in the best practices. And, we're in a very unique time, I think, in the modern era, in which you've got diversity issues, you've got equity issues. There's in the United States now, we have a new administration that seems to be open to pushing that agenda. So I think what will happen is it won't happen immediately, but the companies that do not support flexibility for parents who choose who need the hybrid model are going to see a talent drain. And especially if they have goals of advancing diversity, they're going to need to have supportive policies. So I think, like, for people individually in the short term, you may have to make a switch if you can, and look to move to an employer, to your point earlier, that like on in her site, that publicizes that they have family supportive policies.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely, like you said, Joe, like employers have an incentive to keep this going and to not lose these employees. Remember, it's going to cost them about 3 times as much to find someone else as it will to keep current employees. So that is, I know that it can be scary, and sometimes it's a very real problem that, like, you can't afford to lose your job. And so you feel like you can't afford to, make waves or ask these questions. But it's definitely, you're definitely in a better bargaining position than you think you are, because it would cost them so much more to try and replace people.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Meg, I just want to make one more point. I think that in terms of, while we're in the economic challenges of COVID right now, it's hard. It's going to be hard, maybe, or more difficult to find another job. But I'm sure you've all seen on the news, there are just as many companies that are deciding, we're going to shut down our office. We don't need an in-place office. And so as the economy recovers, those companies are going to be more open to hiring people virtually. It doesn't matter where they are. So I do think that once the economy starts to recover, people will start to recruit from across the country nationally rather than just locally. And that hopefully should open up more opportunity for people who need flexible work schedules.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we are out of time, unfortunately, but Lola and Pilar, I've shared I shared your LinkedIn information with everybody in the Zoom chat here. But is there any place else, what kind of information do you want to leave our community with as we depart today?
Yes, definitely. Thank you all. And I wish that we had more time to talk. One thing that Lola and I are definitely thinking about a lot is kind of how to engage a younger generation of, we're college students ourselves, but all recent graduates, as well as high schoolers and everyone who is going to be going to the workforce soon. And so whether it looks like specific advocacy or a survey and kind of research on that, but how we are going to demand more from our employers so that this next generation of workers and working caregivers don't have to kind of continue and push through in environments as unsupportive as some of these workplaces are. And I appreciate you all for sharing what can be very vulnerable and emotional, which has kind of been, of course, stigmatized and hard to say for all the societal reasons that have pushed working parents down, but really appreciate bringing that into light. So one of the questions we just got was, what alternatives would you recommend if we don't have the funds to hire caregiving services? And this is, of course, something else that is just a huge issue that we didn't even necessarily touch on. But of course, lower income families, parents, and specifically lower income working mothers are facing this disproportionately, of course, than higher income mothers. And so that's why we founded Project Matriarchs. So on a sliding scale, pay what you can basis, over 60% of our families are paying from $0 to $10 an hour. So if you actually just go to projectmatriarchs.com, there is a For Parents tab where we quick survey or interest form that kind of goes through what days of the week you need support, what time zone you're in, and all of that, and kind of what support or subjects you're looking specifically for, either tutoring help or mentorship or enrichment. But we pair college students with families within a day or two, usually, to provide that support. And so would love if any of you need that support. We have a lot of college students who we've interviewed and are eager to get involved, but also just spreading the word as a resource. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn as Project Matriarchs. So love to kind of continue this work and support you through the pandemic and beyond. But yes, thank you all so much for joining us today and having this conversation.
Thank you both so much. All right, so we will, like I said, the rewatch email links will go out probably in about 1 to 2 business days. I've got you know, put some more links up in the chat here, and hopefully we'll see many more of you checking out our past videos as well as on upcoming chat sessions. So thank you so much for spending time with us and learning with Power to Fly today. Pilar and Lola, thank you so much. It was really great to get to learn more about your initiative and chat with you both today. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Bye.